What's up, crew? Welcome back to Libertalia Game Supply. Today we're going to take a look at this new Ashened archetype that we are getting in Phantom Nightmare in next week now. As of recording this video, it's about a week away, and it does some interesting stuff. It does feel like it's missing a lot because we are obviously missing a few waves of support, but we're going to take a look at what all the cards do, what it feels like it's missing out on currently, and then how we can build around that in the time being while we wait for that new support to come in. Now, this new archetype consists of 7 new cards, and when they came out, when the pictures came out in that spoiler video, I was instantly in love. The art on these is incredible. Dark Souls vibes all around. Looks so sick. I mean, look at these guys. We got 7 cards in the archetype currently, with more to come. So with that being said, we'll get into what I assume is meant to be the boss monster here with Vados, the Eruption Dragon of Extinction. It has a quick effect during either main phase to target a field spell in either field zone, special summon itself to your opponent's side of the field, pop that card that you targeted, and then search a continuous trap within the archetype. Currently it's just Eternity. That's the only one we have, but I assume there'll be more for this effect to be more relevant. And then that second effect is what really earns it its name, I think. If it goes from your opponent's board to your graveyard, you have the option to destroy all the monsters on the field. So that does interact a little bit with Hero in particular, with it being a Pyro. They're all Pyro monsters. That kind of can set you up for like a quick effect board wipe. It's kind of hard to play around. We'll cover all that stuff in a little bit. Now, as far as all the Ashened monsters go, outside of Vados, which is not Ashened by name, if Obsidian, the field spell, is on the board when you have these in your hand, they can all special summon themselves from hand for free once per turn. So all of the main deck Ashen monsters do that. And then they all have their own unique effect in addition to that. So we're going to start off here with the level 8 King of the Ashen City. While it's on the board, during your main phase, you can special summon an Ashen monster from your hand, or if your opponent controls a monster with 2800 or more attack, it can special summon an Ashen monster from the deck. So that's even better. That's an insane effect, honestly. And it's what a lot of what I think combos are going to be based around once we start getting some better extenders. But even within what we have right now, it's usually how you're building a little bit of presence on the board. Next we have the aforementioned Hero, the level 7. This guy's my favorite in terms of artwork. Look at this thing. And he has that main phase quick effect pop of a Pyro monster. So the reason that it can interact with the Vados is just because Vados is Pyro. Now, Obsidian does have an effect that allows this to interact a little bit more on your turn, but outside of that, this really only sets you up for that quick effect board wipe or search for your own Obsidian or whatever the heck it may end up being. This feels like the one that will get cut down to 2 and then 1, but probably never to 0, because that is still a valuable effect, and depending on what other support they get, it could be really busted, and I could be totally wrong, but this effect definitely seems the least useful once you really start playing a few games with it. And then, of course, we have the obligatory Stratos of the deck, Priestess of the Ashen City. On summon, whether it be normal or special, you can search an Ashen card and add it to your hand. So that's any of them, but they work around that by making half of our support cards not Ashened by name and thus not searchable. So clever, I suppose. Keep it balanced. It'd be nice if you could search that quick play spell at all, but I understand why you wouldn't. It's a pretty crazy card. Now, the monsters are pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. The spells and traps are where you start getting a little bit of the flavor of the deck involved. For the field spell, we have Obsidian, the Ashen City. This is the one that allows you to activate those special summon effects from the hand. While it's on the board, any face-up special summoned monster on your opponent's side of the field becomes Pyro only on your turn. So Hero does get that quick effect pop against your opponent's whole board, essentially, on your own turn. It's just if you're going first, that doesn't exist, and if you're going second, you're playing through board already, and so that's going to be harder to use, but it is something. It's worth noting. Also, during the end phase, you can recycle a copy of itself from the graveyard by putting it on the bottom of the deck, and then you get an extra draw in the end phase. Now, this is a pretty unique mechanic. There aren't a whole lot of end phase draw or search effects that are particularly good anymore, but this one does seem kind of interesting in that it allows you to continue to recycle Obsidian, and Obsidian is going to get blown up quite a bit just by your own self, and so you can kind of build around knowing that you're getting that extra draw in the end phase versus any other phase of the game. And so it is interesting, and I think that's also fun to play around with. And then finally, the thing that makes this card absolutely great for the deck is if it gets destroyed or banished from the field spell zone, you're allowed to special summon an Ashen monster from your deck. for free. Usually it's going to be King, especially if you have something on their board to let King special summon from the deck, and that's how you really get this stuff going, and that's also why you're going to be recycling that Ashened City over and over again and getting that draw in the end phase. Now for the quick play spell, we have Awakening of Vados. This is probably the best card in the archetype right now, in my opinion. Quick play spell. On activation, you can take an opposite out of your deck and put it in a field spell zone. It doesn't have to be your own. So your own or your opponent's. Once you've resolved that portion of the effect, if your opponent has a card in their field spell zone, you can search a level 5 or higher Dark Pyro monster from your deck. So Vados mainly, but it can search any of the Ashen monsters apart from Priestess at the moment. The main downside here is that it locks you into Pyro monster special summons for the rest of the turn. That's main deck or extra deck. The good news is you don't often need your normal summon for the in-archetype stuff, so you can play an out-of-archetype engine that bases itself around the normal summon and maybe get some use out of that. But unfortunately, if you were going to go look up all of the Pyro extra deck monsters available to you to summon, and then eliminate all the ones that are archetype specific because you have no way of summoning them, and then eliminate all the ones that suck, you have a very small pool of cards you can summon. And by not sucking, it doesn't mean they're good, it just means they're not that bad, and they're just not really worth playing around. And so this is something that will definitely need to be cleaned up in the next wave of support here, hopefully with an extra deck monster or two. And then finally, we have our only trap available to be searched off of the Vados, a continuous trap, Ashened for Eternity. Now on activation, it can recycle an Ashened or Vados from your graveyard and put it back in your hand. And then while it's on the board, you can take one of your monsters on your opponent's side of the field, put it back on your side of the field, and then reduce all of their monsters by the attack of the monster that you return to yourself. So typically it's going to be Vados, which has 2,900. You're going to take them back, and then they're all going to lose 2,900 attack, which will more than likely reduce them all to 0, if not a couple hundred attack points. So also an interesting interaction. I think it's a decent card, but I also think that they could make something that's quite a bit better than this without being completely broken, and so I hope that's what they end up doing. So now that we are aware of all of the cards the archetype has to work with, obviously there's a few things we're missing. That extra deck thing is a huge problem. Being locked into Pyro monsters and having nothing really of value to summon makes it hard to play around. So that's going to be issue number 1 that we need to figure out. My best bet is that they're going to give us a fusion monster of some sort, just because everything is such a weird level, and I'm guessing we're going to end up getting like a level 5 and 6 Ashened as well. So XC summoning, probably not an option. Synchro summoning would be really weird unless you have something that can level modulate. So my best bet is going to be a fusion monster. One of the other main issues is that the archetype doesn't seem to have a whole lot of interaction with your opponent's board on your opponent's turn. Apart from you giving them the Vados, which they can use for an extra deck summon, which it is level 9, so they're probably not XD summoning with it, meaning they could link it or synchro summon it away, which would then resolve its effect. So even if they leave it there, the only bit of interaction you have is that hero quick effect to pop it and then blow up the board, and it blows up your board as well. And so if they're aware of that, they can just link summon with it immediately, knowing that they're going to lose the whole board, and they just don't commit too much to it until you have to use a Vados effect or not use it at all, and then they can play through your own empty board and just wreck you. And the final and largest issue with this archetype right now is that they are Pyro monsters, and the Stratos, which is a for sure 3 of forever now, is level 4, meaning that this thing can be searched by Bonfire, meaning that this $70 deck would now cost you about $400 to run effectively just to play the Bonfires in it, and that sucks. So I don't recommend it. You could always play the Allure of Darkness as a replacement, but it's not nearly as good, obviously. So, maybe you're just wealthier than me, and that won't be a problem for you. But with all that out of the way, let's take a look at how I've chosen to build this list in the meantime until we get some new support, just to start getting a handle on how I like the deck to run. Okay, so taking a look at this list I have put together here, I know that you've probably seen, if you've been looking for deck profiles for Ashen around YouTube, there's a lot of Kashtira I've seen, Ashen Kashtira. I don't think it's really worth playing that, just because Kashtira, unless you already have it, it'll cost you a couple bucks to pick all that stuff up, and you're probably going to be replacing it all in 3 months when that Destruction, whatever the hell the next set's called, comes out. So I wouldn't spend the money on that personally, but to each their own. What I've opted for instead is the extra deck is solely focused around putting IP on board, then going with your 1-card combo through Awakening, and then you would have an IP into an SP, which can protect your hero to preserve it for the next turn, and you get the interruptions with that and the board wipe and whatever. Now this is a little bit janky just because you're trying to play around the restriction that the deck puts on itself with the no pyro monsters thing, which is a huge mess. And so how I've gone about that is with the Spirit Engine, the Aratama Sakitama, normal summon the Aratama, search the Sakitama effect, get the extra normal summon for the Sakitama, and now with your 2 level 4s you can make the IP or you can make the Infernal Flame Banshee, either of which will get you kind of into a better place than where you were before. And so I felt like that was a good cheap option there. For the hand traps here, we got double Veiler, triple Ash. I would like to fit more in there, but the deck bricks so hard that you have to play as much consistency cards as possible. So we got the triple Bonfire, triple Prosperity. If it were to be where we got monsters that could add to the consistency versus just being bricks within themselves, apart from the Priestess, you could probably cut the Prosperities out at that point and play more hand traps, nib, or whatever. I would not play the Imperm. The reason I wouldn't play the Imperm is because this giving you that draw in the end phase is going to give you an additional card, and if it's Imperm after you've just built a whole board, it's now useless. But if it's Veiler or Ash or Nib or whatever that is a monster or can activate itself from the hand, you now have value there. You now have interaction on your opponent's turn, which is something this deck lacks. And then the last final note for the main deck here, I got the 1 Summon Breaker and the 1 Set Rotation just because, like I mentioned a couple times now, this deck bricks. If you open any combination of these guys with no way to use them, useless. Can't summon them, can't do anything with them unless your opponent was nice enough to donate to you a field spell on their side of the field and you're going second. Then you could use your Vados, but otherwise this is all worthless at that point. And so just having the extra search for the Obsidian was the only reason the Set Rotation was in there, which means this could be anything. I think what it will likely end up being is there's a new field spell coming out in the next set that gives you, it excavates cards depending on how many cards your opponent controls and lets you pick one. So it's like a really big pot of duality. I would probably replace it with that. I just can't recall the name of it right now because I just briefly read it over not too long ago here. So I got the Summon Breaker in there, so if you gave them the Summon Breaker, it's going to stay set because they're not going to activate that on themselves and limit themselves. So it could be whatever you want. They're just not going to activate it. You just need to get Obsidian on the field or the deck does not work. And then that limitation in the extra deck meant that we have to kind of focus it around IP because we can't summon any valuable extra deck monsters on our own turn. Meaning we have to set up the IP, leave a few bodies on board, and then make a decision on what we're summoning from there. Now the SP is the obvious choice, but I was just bitching about Bonfire being at 3 in this deck and needing to be $350 worth of the total cost of this thing, so double SP Little Knight being $250 for 2 of them, probably not the best choice at that point, but I just think you got to. Like, the deck just doesn't do anything on your opponent's turn well enough for you to not. These two I just felt were interesting as newer cards coming out, but obviously could be replaced with anything else that you want. This one would allow you to make more use of your Eternity, being able to remove something from their side of the field and then summon itself, and then you can take it back, so you take that body away so they can't summon with it. And then this one gives you that effect negation. So 2 little interesting effects, not necessarily saying I would play them, I just thought they were worth mentioning. I've got 1 Beauregard Dragon in here. It can recycle things that are destroyed in that same turn, so if you summon it, you could then, on your own turn, pop something that was in defense mode or something that you used for a search or a special summon or whatever, and then put it back on the field to use as more link material. It also has a quick effect to turn something to defense mode, and basically the whole extra deck is just around effects that you can activate on your opponent's turn, and so it does that, and there aren't really that many generic options that do that. Same with the Boral Sword, it just has that quick effect to change something to defense mode. It gets that extra attack each turn, so it would allow you to get into OTK territory at that point. And then the Underworld Goddess, I think this will be a mainstay in this deck, being able to use your opponent's monster's material, so it becomes removal on your opponent's turn. It's got a good negation effect. I think this will end up staying. It's really easy to set up your board to be able to make this when you pass. And then finally we got that Despian Lulu, level 12 Synchro on summon. If something leaves the extra deck, boost everything you control by 500, negate something face up on your opponent's side of the field, so it's still within that kind of quick effect on your opponent's turn category, more or less. And you might be wondering, how the hell are you going to do that? We're playing the Agnimal Candle. If it gets searched to your hand, it can special summon itself immediately. It's a level 4 tuner. It also can level modulate. So I was playing around with more synchro monsters, but not good. You need the link monsters because of this restriction here. So this can be searched off of the bonfire and then immediately special summoned, or off of the flame banshee and then immediately special summoned. And even there, you could go into this play, into the flame banshee to get that search, to link into something else. You know, there's a few different things you can do with that, and so that is how that all works together. So now that I've explained my choices, we'll get into a few combos here, and I'll show you the way that I've been understanding the deck to function thus far. Okay, so first things first, you have a 1-card combo with the Awakening of Vados, which is unfortunate because it means you get no extra deck summons unless you open something that allow you to do your extra deck summoning before you summon the Awakening, which will be what we cover next here. So we're going to place this in the opponent's field spell zone so that we get that search, and we're going to grab the Vados off of that. We'll use our Vados, pop our own Obsidian in their field zone and give it to them, throw it in defense mode, and then we're going to get the search off of the Vados here for the Eternity. We'll put it in the back row, and then we're also going to get the special summon off of Obsidian. Obsidian is going to special summon our King for us. And now because we gave him the Vados, King can special summon from the deck. So now just to make this more complete, we're going to summon the hero, but you have the option to get either one. This would only be the better choice if you had stuff in your opening hand apart from that Awakening that would make it so. So I think hero is going to be the better one here. And then hero we can use, you can leave it like this if you want, and then you have that board wipe set up. I would say pop the Vados now, get yourself a new copy of Obsidian, and then in the end phase, we're not going to blow ourselves up. In the end phase, you get that draw. It's unsorted, so it should just be another copy of Vados here, but don't mind that. So in the end phase, you get that draw. You have the Eternity set, so you can activate it, and this is blank, it's nothing, but when you flip this, you can grab the Vados in the graveyard back to your hand, and then it's a quick effect, so you can pop this to special summon it back. You can pop it again for the board wipe, and this will replace a copy of Obsidian in the field zone and then give you that draw again during your next end phase. So there is a little bit of cycling going on there. And I won't show you this whole combo a second time, but if you open these two cards, Obsidian and Vados, you can do the exact same combo we just did, except there's no extra deck restrictions. So whatever the other 3 cards in your hand are can now let you go nuts with that extra deck a little bit more. Just thought it was worth noting. So as mentioned, if you open an extender with Awakening, you can just set up your extra deck play ahead of time and then go into your Awakening. So we'll go Aratama, search for the Sakitama, get the extra normal summon. The problem here isn't these normal summons, it's that if you do them after the Awakening, you now no longer have a way to make use of them because you don't have any Pyro Link monsters. So we'll just get that IP on the board right away, and then you can do this combo the same way. And we'll get you there real quick. I'll not explain the whole thing over and over again. It's the same pretty much every time because of how limited the effects are at the moment. But you're pretty much set up for an SP that can help your hero dodge any sort of removal or dodge your own board wipe. And I'll explain it right at the end here when we get to it. Run through all the same stuff, set the Eternity, special summon, grab the King again. King every time, baby. King's gonna get our special summon and we'll get our hero out of the deck. And now we're set to go here. So what you have is when you pass turn, so now I would not pop the Vados for the Obsidian, just skip out on the draw this turn. When you pass turn, you can link this into your SP and get a banish. So you have an interrupt there when they try to summon. You then would be able to quick effect pop, then respond to your quick effect pop with the SP to banish both of these. This would be an SP, this would be hero. They remove themselves. Then when this goes to the graveyard, you could use this effect to blow up the whole board, and then you get those 2 monsters back, obviously, at the end of the turn. That's probably the most explosive play this deck can make as far as like limited card combo. If you start going up to like 3, 4, 5 card combo, you can go a little bit harder, I suppose. And just for one last quick one here, if you open these 2, which doesn't set you back on your extra deck summons, plus a spare copy of King, you can get into your Buzz King, which is quickly becoming one of my new favorite extra deck monsters for whatever reason. I've been loving it. Get all of our same searches going on, set our back row, get our King. King's gonna special summon. This time it can special summon the Priestess, so just a little twist on it here. We'll use that effect, we'll get the Priestess, and we just want an extra copy of Obsidian at that point to make use of the King in hand. So the Priestess will get us our new field spell, throw that in the field zone, and then because this king was summoned off of an Obsidian in the graveyard, this king can summon itself off of its own effect, and you can go into your Buzz King because we didn't limit ourselves to anything. So now you get the look at the whatever your opponent has in the extra deck, rip one away. That's not for you anymore. Now you know what they're playing. This could also remove the Vados if you wanted it off the board for whatever reason, but I would just leave it there. Flip this. You're probably not going to get any value out of that first recycle effect in this instance unless you had some other monster on the board, like you opened a hero or something, but it can steal this back. So now you take that body away, or leave it there, let them special summon with it and blow up the board anyway. But it just kind of demonstrates a little bit how you can play around the extra deck nonsense, but it's so much less good, and hopefully we get some good support for this to clean that up. Well, if you made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out with me for just a few minutes here today. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see any updates on this deck as we get new waves of support in the future. Happy deck building. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one. Goodbye.